There are a lot of heroes in the world of comicdom, and not all of them are created or treated equally. Because of that, some are just super underrated. I'm Adam Andrews with Top 10 Nerd, and this is my list of the top 10 underrated superpowers that are actually awesome. In at number 10 is Lifeguard. Lifeguard, or Heather Cameron, arguably has one of the most useful mutant powers possible. Her ability is called Danger Detection Response, and basically what it means is that she can detect danger to her or others' lives in her vicinity, and she can literally evolve whatever powers are necessary for her to stop those lives from being lost. She can gain more than one power at a time and is able to control said power after just a few seconds. It also seems to be kind of limitless in what she can do. Her situation biomorphic adaptations have taken the form of growing wings for flight, extra arms for carrying, and super strength, her skin turning into a sort of golden metallic super awesome armor, gills for underwater breathing with her legs even turning into a fish tail for better swimming ability, as well as her simply upping her strength level from normal to superhuman. It's almost too fitting that she was an actual lifeguard before her powers emerged, because she's a literal lifesaver. Number 9, Mantis. Mantis actually got her start in comics when she used her abilities to reform Swordsman or Jacques Duquesne, which actually got her into the Avengers. Mantis's powers and abilities are more than what you may have gathered from her film counterpart. Mantis has complete control over her body, which in turn gives her peak human agility, the ability to accelerate healing through force of will, and an empathic nature enabling her to communicate telepathically with and sense the emotions of others as psychic vibrations. She can also control her heart and respiratory rate and blood flow. Her mastery of the Kotati priest's martial arts, which focuses on the manipulation of nerve endings and pressure points, has enabled her to knock out beings as powerful as Thor, and her telepathic and empathic abilities are improved upon thanks to the 2 antennae she has coming out of her head. Right here. She doesn't stop there though. Mantis also gained abilities when she merged with the Kotati, such as being able to communicate with both plants and animals and survive in space in a physically solid energy form. She can transfer herself from plant life to plant life across interstellar distances or dimensions, creating a new body from the plant life wherever she ends up. She can transmit and receive telepathic impressions, she has precognitive powers, and more recently she can fire powerful pyrokinetic energy blasts, form energy shields, communicate directly with cosmic beings like eternity and death, and completely control her personal energies as well as her physical form. All this to say, don't sleep on Mantis. Number 8, Sage. Sage is a super genius with a brain more powerful than any computer in the world, granting her perfect memory and rapid analytical abilities. She can come up with the perfect plan in an instant, learn just about any skill without having to practice, remember everything she's ever experienced, perform multiple tasks at once by allocating a partition of her brain to each task, and thanks to training with Professor X, she can engage in telepathy. Her telepathic abilities specifically allow her to detect minds and read them, project thoughts, astral projection, cast realistic mental illusions, and she even has a kind of psionic defense unique to her called her firewall. But it doesn't even stop there, as Sage even has some biokinetic abilities as well, including reading another mutant or person's genetic code and DNA, being able to literally see who someone's related to, jumpstarting latent or enhancing current mutant abilities, and has complete control over her physical body, being able to expel nanobots from her body by controlling her immune system, almost like highly advanced antivirus. She needs more time in the spotlight, just like Mantis. Number 7, the Living Swarm. Okay, so there are a few characters out there in comics who can turn into or are made up of things different from you and I. One of the more interesting of those things would be bugs. Characters like Marvel's Swarm, who is made up of a huge number of bees, or Spider-Man and Carl King, who are literally thousands of super spiders who take on the form of a human being. It may be the stuff of nightmares to a lot of us, but the ways in which this ability comes in handy are kind of incredible. Obviously, having a form that can split apart or move to take on different shapes is incredibly useful for getting into places you're not supposed to be, turning yourself into useful items, being basically intangible, or being able to terrify pretty much anyone. But for Carl King and Spider-Man specifically, their consciousness is actually spread throughout the swarm, allowing them to achieve a kind of rudimentary form of possibly immortality, as only one single spider needs to survive for the entire swarm to be remade and just carry on living. Swarm, being made up of thousands of bees, can even fly through the air, and his powers allow him to control other bees to add to his swarm and grow to bigger sizes. The only real issues would come in the form of bug spray and insecticides, but at that point you can't really do much, so There you go. Number 6, cartoon physics. This ability is definitely a unique one, and one not used too often, and for an understandable reason. It is basically unbeatable. Characters like Batmite and Mr. Mxyzptlk, Captain Carrot and the Zoo Crew from DC Comics, and Deadpool, Impossible Man, and Spider-Ham from Marvel Comics all have some kind of varying degree of this power, not to mention the completely insane character of the Mask. It's hard to explain exactly how this power works or what it even technically is. For someone like Spider-Ham, for example, he's able to become more cartoony the more danger he's in, which kind of lets him and others like him just take a hell of a lot more punishment without being hurt too badly. Characters like Batmite and Mr. Mxyzptlk actually just completely warp reality, usually in comical and cartoonish ways. Like I said, it's all hard to properly explain, but these characters can creatively turn almost anything into a weapon. They can eat an ungodly amount of anything, detach their body parts, spin like tornadoes, create traps and allies out of what looks like ink. They can deflate or inflate, they can manipulate the weather based on their emotions, talk to animals, be talking animals, have a great sense of humor, and almost always they break the fourth wall. Actually, being aware of the fact that the character is actually in a comic book is usually a good indication that they have some kind of cartoon physics abilities. And if you really think about it, this ability kind of gives these characters a kind of godhood in comic books. Number 5, living sand. Sand. Yes, it's coarse and it's rough and it does get everywhere, but sand is just millions of tiny rocks, and as such, it can be very strong while also being almost liquid in its composition. Obviously, the obvious choice for examples here would be the Spider-Man villain Sandman, who has been a pain in the backside and occasionally an ally to Spider-Man using these abilities. But there's also the mutant Dust from Marvel Comics as well, who can transform herself into an explosive cloud of sand-like silicon, allowing her to reform her body at will or maintain an aerial-based sand form in the shape of her human body. Clayface from DC Comics is even a character that I think sort of falls into this category, but then we aren't really talking about sand anymore. But if we want to talk manga, there's even Gaara from Naruto, and he'll really show you how powerful sand can be. It's actually kind of scary. Sand can crush, blind, bury, dehydrate, drown, and even erode opponents, which is an absolutely terrifying thought. Number 4, Technopathy. Just like the last point, there aren't many characters with this power since it's pretty OP in our modern world. DC's Cyborg and Brainiac, Marvel's Apocalypse, Ultron, or even the mutant Hijack are just a few of the comic book characters who have tapped into the powers of technology, and with it, they were able to bring some of the most powerful heroes and villains to their knees. Technopathy is the ability to psychically perceive and interface with technology, and while the use of the power varies from individual to individual, it allows the user to perceive the location of mechanical devices, physically perceive structure and function of those devices, activate or deactivate power for electronic devices, communicate with and command said electronic devices, and even psychically channel their perception or consciousness through electronic media at will, effectively gaining a sort of pseudo-immortality, just like being a living swarm or being living sand. With the world becoming more and more technologically dependent, this ability just gets more and more useful. Number 3, Forge. Forge has been an important member of the X-Men and mutant community for a long time, but for some reason he always seems kind of unused to me. He's almost like the X-Men's version of Q from James Bond, but not really. His mutant ability is that he is an intuitive genius. He can visually perceive mechanical energy, quote unquote, in action. Like, he can just understand how something works by looking at it, as easily as breathing. This power allows Forge to instinctively know and understand the potential and functional operations of any machine or technology device in his visual range. A skill that, combined with his natural intelligence, allows him to conceive, design, and build mechanical devices and operate, modify, and disassemble existing technology or create countermeasures for it. It's almost hard to explain how this power is a power, but it is. It's allowed him to subconsciously invent and construct something where someone else would have to actually think about it, design it, and then create it. He's been able to just make it and then deconstruct it later to figure out how to improve it. He's created cybernetic systems, sophisticated holograms, and elaborate computer and fiber optic systems, as well as time travel devices. His potential is vast, and that's before you take his magical affinity into account. Number 2, stretching. Elasticity and plasticity, the ability to convert the mass of an entire body into a highly malleable state at will, is an ability that has many more applications than you think. This ability is shared by Martian Manhunter using his shapeshifting ability from DC. There's also Plastic Man, and then of course Reed Richards, Mr. Fantastic, who is probably the best known hero with powers of elasticity. He has been able to use these powers to absorb or redirect the impacts of bullets or explosions, stretch his limbs to distances of 1,500 feet, and for shapeshifting, it's allowed him to do so many different things: entangling, imitating, parachuting, gliding, cushioning, slingshotting, bouncing. He can do all of it, being able to go as thin as a sheet of paper or as narrow as a needle, and even turning himself into a liquid solid state. But it goes even further. He could even mold himself to the shape of something like a key to unlock a door. Basically, this power has a lot of uses. And finally, in at number 1, Multiple Man. Multiple Man has such a crazy interesting power. Jimmy, or James Madrox, is actually a changeling, which is sort of a genetic precursor to Marvel's mutants, who gain their abilities at birth instead of having their X gene activated later on. For James, his power is that of duplication. He can duplicate himself multiple times upon impact, and each of his dupes can create one single dupe of their own. One of the real benefits of this power is that the Prime Madrox will retain any memories of his dupe's experiences. So, let's say you had to read like 10 books in a week. Well, you could have like 10 dupes all read one book each, or you could have like 20 dupes each read half a book. And then when they re-merge with you, you have all of their memories of each book that they just read. Multiple Man is like an information gathering powerhouse, but he can also use the ability to learn skills. Like, one of his dupes trained as a Shaolin monk and trained in meditation. One was trained as an EMT. One audited an autonomy class for like 6 months. One passed the New York bar exam, and one claimed to be the world's greatest detective. Stuff like that. In his self-titled comic from 2018, he even goes into a future world that is completely ruled by Magi, which is the plural for James's dupes. I'd love to see his potential shown in the MCU or something, but he's just kind of so underrated that I don't think it would happen. And that's all I got. I'm Adam Andrews. Thank you guys so much for watching here on Top 10 Nerd. I'll catch you nerds on the flippy flop. Until then, peace out.